This Thanksgiving week, in a best of Only in America, we go from South Bend to Boise to the border to celebrate how American communities are welcoming the stranger. First, the Iraqi refugee who served the American forces had to flee his homeland and shared the reception he was given when he arrived in South Bend, Indiana.
They wait on the airport, South Bend Airport, with the sign in Arabic. They say, Ahlan wa sahlan, that means welcome. 2 or 3 daughters, they have like toys to my kids. It's an amazing moment when we arrive and all of these people wait, and when they say welcome, we are like new family.
How the people of Idaho welcomed refugees and repelled some of the negative news reporting surrounding their arrival.
The tensions were really fueled by the alt-right news media, that really our communities have been adjusting well, have been welcoming to refugees, but we've really seen the negative impact of people from outside the state.
And the Notre Dame professor who was moved by the spirituality of migrants at the border.
In the very complex and vast array of immigration issues, there's also a need for a theological perspective, because when everything else is taken away, all you have left is God. And the migrants know that.
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Nirani with a special Thanksgiving edition of Only in America. But before we start our journey, a quick sense of where things stand. Late Monday evening, U.S. District Judge John Tigger ruled to temporarily block the Trump administration's new asylum ban, which would have only granted asylum to migrants who come through ports of entry. Also on Monday, the Pentagon said it would begin a drawdown of its 5,800 troops from the southwest border as early as this week. Army Lieutenant General Jeffrey Buchanan told Politico that he expects, quote, all the active duty troops that President Trump ordered sent to the border before the midterm elections should be home by Christmas. Bill Kristol, editor of the Weekly Standard and dedicated conservative Never Trumper, tweeted, how can this be? We should be left defenseless against the caravan. Bill, we appreciate your concern, really, we do. But our fellow Americans are not quite as worried as the president would hope. In fact, a poll taken by Monmouth University just days after the midterm election showed that 70% of Americans believe members of the migrant caravan should qualify for asylum. Despite the heated campaign rhetoric, Hassan Dudar in USA Today reports that few minds were changed by all the campaign rhetoric on this issue, but the rhetoric certainly helped deepen the nation's partisan divide. So during this Thanksgiving week, I am grateful American voters are skeptical of fear-mongering, and that they remain dedicated to the idea of welcoming immigrants and refugees to our nation. And now, to our Best of Only in America journey across the country. Back in 2003, just after the invasion of Iraq, Rafed Alsaad decided to help the American forces in Baghdad's Green Zone. It was a brave but perilous decision for Rafed, with his wife and 2 young sons, and it was 7 years before his courage was finally rewarded. Safe now and part of a welcoming community in South Bend, Indiana, Rafed told me of a constant fear of Iraqi militias and the night they paid his family a terrifying visit, and his journey from Baghdad to Syria to Indiana.
It's a hard story if you like to share. I don't like to go to this time because it's like really hard time for me, but sometimes I like to let the people what we have over there and why we choose to come into the United States. On 2003, when the war in Iraq started, after Saddam Hussein, the government, the president, he's gone, I'm work with U.S. Army in Iraq. We rebuilt the building for the soldiers and the U.S. Army to stay on this building after the war is like a lot of windows, doors is broken. When we start working with them, we have like people they don't like because they thought we help for something bad to our countries or something. But this is not right. Not what I believe. I believe U.S. Army, when it's coming, give us the freedom. I like to help people. I like to work with a lot of people. They take all these kilometers coming to my country to help us. And after we work with them, it's very hard. We need to cover our face. We can share with a lot of people. We worked with U.S. Army because we need to be hiding, very careful. I'm working on the green zone in Baghdad. Very hard to get from my home to the green zone, and I need to hide, and I change my different cars to get there. After 2 years, I'm working on the green zone. 2004, and the end of the 2004, I just quit the job over there because it's get very, very hard, and we saw a lot of people. They work inside the green zone, but they are not just working over there. They take our names and give it to somebody else, and we feel like a lot of people, they're looking for us now. In 2006, one night, the militia is coming to our house, and they nick the door at, it's around 8, 9 o'clock. Night is very dark, we have no electrical, and I have 2 boys, is 3 years and 2 years, with my wife with me. They came, and we heard a lot of loud voices outside. I thought I will be killed in this night because anybody is working with U.S. Army or help them to translate or anything. They have the list of the names, and those people just come in. They killed a lot of people. I know a lot of my friends is killed when their families around them. And this time, my wife, she started to scream because she thought I will be die, and she tried to stop me. Don't open the door. After that, when I opened the door, I'm lucky in this night because they take me the second choice to leave Iraq and all, about 24 hours. They will come in next day. If they find any one of my family, they will kill all my family.
So they gave you 24 hours to leave?
24 hours to leave. I take very, very quick move. I take my wife, my sons, without clothes, without anything. I just go to the Syria. This is the first country except the immigration in that time. I went to the Syria. I lived in Syria about 6 years. After that, I heard anybody is working with the United States, he can apply about immigration or special visa. I applied, and I'm wait about a year to get approved. And 2012, we get the visa to come to the United States.
So it took 7 years?
It's 7 years from that. But
7 years from that 24-hour night?
Yes.
Yeah.
And 2012, on January 25th, we arrived here.
Well, first of all, before we transition, I thank you very much for sharing.
You're welcome.
And thank you for what you did in Iraq.
And I just give you very, very close because I know we have time, and it's a lot of bad thing, but I feel most of I need to skip it because it's bad story, and I don't think a lot of people they like to hear that because it's really sad.
What was it like landing in the United States?
When I applied in Syria, they told me you will go to the United States because I don't have any family here before. That means I don't have the choice city or which state I need to go for. They told me you will go to the Indiana. But
did you know? Had you ever heard of Indiana?
I never heard of Indiana, especially in South Bend.
Me neither. No, I'm just kidding.
Really, I try to Google, ask friends. We have no idea about where we are at, and when we travel, the first time I hold my wife's hand and I told her, we'll go for nowhere. I don't know any idea. I don't know it's better or not, but I believe we made the right choice. We came to the United States. We have a lot of people was waiting on us. Last month, I think, I have some pictures when I arrived. I looking for the picture. I said, it's a lot of people waiting on us. We thought we are nobody over there. We have no member. No, we believe a lot of people, they know about us. They care about us. And they wait on the airport, South Bend Airport, with the sign in Arabic. They said, Ahlan wa sahlan, that means welcome. 2 or 3 daughters, they have toys to my kids. It's an amazing moment when we arrive and all these people wait, and when they say welcome, we are like new family. Like the first night when we came here, my wife, she's cry all night because she thought like, oh, this is like different language, different culture, everything is different. When we came from the airport to the camp, what we need to stay over there until my apartment it's ready. I believe a lot of people hiding, working very, very hard. And always I say thank you for all these people. All these people I appreciate in all my life. They work really hard.
Yeah.
I stay 5 days on the place on Notre campus. A lot of people outside working very hard to make my house, my first house in the United States, is ready for me. That means I just came, opened the door, come inside. I have furniture, I have TV, I have a lot of things. I don't believe I will have it the first month.
Yeah.
Because when we came, a lot of people, they told us, oh, you will have like somebody help you over there. They will give you like very bad furniture. Maybe it's not. Maybe you don't have TV for a long time. You don't have internet. You can talk with your families. Or no, that's not happened. Here, I have like really nice house.
Do you think you'll stay in South Bend?
I love South Bend. I believe the people who helped me the first time I need, if I can help this community, I help the people who's helped me.
Last question. Finish this sentence. Only in America, ...
Only America, you can find the life what you want. You can build the life what you want. You can speak only in America. You can have like freedom, like really freedom, because a lot of countries they said we have freedom, but only in America we have like really freedom. You can speak, you can do the religion stuff or what you want, and only in America you feel you are welcome to be a citizen.
Thank you, Rafat.
You're welcome.
It was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Rafed Alsaad is an American hero. But as we exchanged emails after the interview, Rafed told me his biggest regret is the extended family he left behind. Because he helped American forces, his mother, brother, and sister are now living in exile in Jordan, unable to return to Iraq. Rafed's dream is to be reunited with them in the United States. This is our special Thanksgiving edition of Only in America. You can read more about our podcast guests at immigrationforum.org. And while you're there, why not take a second to subscribe to Only in America?
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the James Irvine Foundation, expanding opportunity for the people of California, and from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, established in 1911 by Andrew Carnegie to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding.
I spoke with Priscilla Salant, who, until recently, directed the McClure Center for Public Policy Research at the University of Idaho. She told me a labor shortage is the biggest challenge facing the state's dairy owners. So Priscilla and I are sitting in downtown Boise at the Dawson Taylor Coffee Roasters, hence the background noise of espresso machines and whatnot. So Priscilla, first of all, describe to me your sense of how the state of Idaho has changed as a result of immigration.
All of our research points to a very positive impact of immigration on Idaho. We experienced probably the largest surge of immigration in the 90s, some in the 2000s. It slowed dramatically, but the positive economic benefits that began in the 90s and in the 2000s persist today with a very diversified economy, especially in south central Idaho, where many of our immigrants have moved.
So let's take you in a step back here. How did you get to Idaho?
My husband and I chose Idaho as a place to live based on our ability to get jobs. We lived in Moscow in the northern part of the state, so there are economic opportunities here in Idaho, and we also moved for quality of life. We lived in a small community that was the perfect place to raise children.
As you were kind of setting up roots in Idaho, was there a moment as you were raising your family and moving through your career where you realized that the state was changing, and you realized in a way that almost illustrated the data that was somewhat more personal than the data that you studied? I
lived in northern Idaho, which is a largely non-Hispanic population, for over 20 years. And then in 2009, I moved down to the southern part of the state, particularly to the Treasure Valley, which is southwest Idaho. And I realized that the state of southern Idaho is much, much different than northern Idaho. And the demographic and economic changes in the South really are tied in some ways to immigration. But it is an increasingly diverse population in southern Idaho that is almost invisible to the people in the northern part of the state. So it was that actually travel broadens people's horizons, and in my case, I just had to move from the northern part of the state to the southern part to realize that Idaho is undergoing a huge transformation.
How was the economy different between, say, northern Idaho and where you moved in southern Idaho, and what was the role of the immigrant population in the southern part of the state?
The North has historically been very natural resource dependent, in particular dependent on mining and forestry. And while those industries don't employ very many people anymore, there's still a real culture around resource dependence, and new industry is a lot of it is service-based. So service and natural resources in the northern part of the state. The southern part of the state, of course, is much more urban. There's 40% of the state's population lives in the Boise, Ada County metropolitan area. This is where our urban area is. Then moving east across southern Idaho, you see a really amazingly diverse agricultural economy with both production of raw products and processing. So the economies of north and south look a lot different, and you feel a sense of economic vibrancy in the south that you don't really feel up north.
So over the next couple of days, I'm going to be spending some time with the milk processing community, dairy owners, processors, cheese producers, etc. So give me a sense of kind of how the dairy industry has changed in the state, and what's the crucial role that the migrant population has played in the dairy industry specifically.
Idaho's dairy industry has very closely tracked the national trends of fewer farms producing much larger quantities. So you really have an industrial scale dairy sector that has grown right alongside of milk processing. Dairy production is very labor intensive, and as dairies expanded in the 1990s and in the early part of the 2000s, they had huge demand for labor. That industry would never have grown the way it has without the immigrant labor coming in. But that wasn't the end of the story. The processing grew, the milk processing grew, also high demand for labor, but less likely to be undocumented. And then from the dairy processing came an even more diverse food processing industry. So you have Cliff Bar and Annie's Pasta and all kinds of food processing that wasn't here before. You could really see the economic diversification occurring really on the shoulders of the immigrant labor that originally moved here for dairies.
I don't think many people across the country realize that the state has been bringing in roughly 1,000 refugees per year. What has been the impact on the southern part of the state, and what do you think, what are the tensions that come with that as well?
Certainly in the last year and a half or so, we have seen tensions around the refugee issue. But it turns out now, in retrospect, that the tensions were really fueled by the alt-right news media, that really our communities have been adjusting well, have been welcoming to refugees historically and continuing into the last several years. But we've really seen the negative impact of people from outside the state wanting to use us as a kind of case in point to say there are problems here. But the story is that the alt-right news had to retract their so-called news reports that they made, that in fact things actually are going well in the part of the state where the refugees are resettled.
This is a special edition of Only in America for Thanksgiving. Father Dan is a Catholic priest and an award-winning author and film producer. He's also Associate Professor of Theology and Global Affairs at the University of Notre Dame and the Director of the Global Leadership Program at the Kellogg Institute for International Studies. He draws on years of work helping migrants and refugees both internationally and in the U.S. His work, he told me, began in Central and Latin America, but was inspired by a story from his high school days.
I was an exchange student in Uruguay and Argentina, and I remember being exposed to the military dictatorships at the time, and to be honest, it was a whole new world. One of the children of the family that I stayed with was a desaparecido, and he just simply disappeared one day. And I was awakened just to the injustices that were going on to the people living there. And so I think two things happened at that time. One, I became more aware of the bigger issues going on in the world around me, and so it was really the issue of justice that came to the forefront, but also the issue of the inner journey came up, because I really couldn't talk to anybody because I was just learning the language. So that led me to a deeper conversation with God. Mm-hmm. And from that kind of unfolded a lot of my life, both in terms of understanding global affairs, but also in understanding the kind of inner journey. Mm-hmm. So as my life unfolded, I went to college, and after college I entered the seminary just one step at a time, trying to understand where God was leading me. And it wasn't a part of the master plan for me, both in terms of becoming a priest or entering into the migration issue, but I think it claimed me or found me more than I found it. And when I was first ordained, I was assigned to work in a Hispanic parish. Mm-hmm. So having worked in Latin America, I wanted to continue that in working with Latinos in the United States. One of the first families I met was living in two very small rooms of a person who was a maid at Notre Dame. And they were all crammed in, and they'd all just come across the border. They were all undocumented.
Mm-hmm. What year was this?
This was in 1992.
Yeah.
But something of both their suffering, but the love that was there, claimed me. And I thought that they just had such a way of banding together and of also giving expression to the strength of their faith. And that from that point on, I knew this issue was going to be very important. So I finally, afterwards, I worked in the parish for a number of years, and I mean, I can remember going through everything from, trying to help them find jobs, dealing with their immigration status, to actually helping them go through baptisms as well as births. A number of them had children along the way, and often in emergency status, they would pull me in. Mm-hmm. And but also I can remember marrying them, baptizing them, doing their quinceañeras, and so on. So my life became intertwined with the migrant community. But in time, I went on to do graduate studies, and I wanted to study spirituality. I really wanted to study the inner journey. But as I studied Latinos, that got me more and more into the issue of immigration. So I was out in California, mm-hmm. working in the Coachella Valley, and it was a very vibrant Latino community, and I really wanted to know what brought it to life. Many of them were immigrants, and many of them had come over from Mexico. And as we were doing retreats with them, mm-hmm. They actually would go back to their home countries. And so that got me into the roots of their communities and the immigration challenges that they faced. So I saw some of the root problems that led people to migrate. So in time, this inner journey, outer journey dynamic began to emerge, mm-hmm. and but also between the academic world and the grassroots. And I often say that when I was in the migrant camps, people didn't care that I know, they just wanted to know that I cared. Yeah. Whereas people in the academic world didn't care that I cared, they just cared that I know. And I was trying to figure out, where do I fit in this world? But then finally I figured out, no, actually I'm on the border. And I'm really in the border between these two worlds. And I guess for the last 20 years since I've been in the academic world, try to build that bridge between the academy and grassroots. Because I've loved my experiences, being in the grassroots. Mm-hmm. My work really builds out of the life of the people. But I've also found that in the very complex and vast array of immigration issues, there's also a need for a theological perspective. Mm-hmm. Because when everything else is taken away, all you have left is God. And the migrants know that. And so the question is not how do I speak about God to them, but how do they really experience God and how do they speak about it. So a lot of my work is kind of going to borders in different parts of the world to try to understand the narratives of migrants and what's going on with their outer journey, but also what's going on with their inner journey.
How do you help somebody grapple with their own fear so that they're not afraid?
A lot of times, even with my own students, we do a lot of work on the true self and the false self, and like how do we differentiate between what other people want us to be and who we in our own inner depths want to be. And that's not an easy process. And sometimes I can see students come up to that border and it's like, what if everything that I feel like I want to be is not what others told me I should be? And what do I do with that? And sometimes they stall out right at that place and it becomes very troublesome, because then the question is, what is this going to cost me to be authentic? And so sometimes you just have to stay in the fear. So one of the things that we do is we do some exercises on mindfulness and focusing, which is not to eliminate the fear, but sometimes just to sit with it. And it's really to move through it. I think the challenge is to just sort of name that fear, be with that fear, but also help people move through it.
Do you find a similar fear or a different fear among the migrants that you've gotten to know?
Yeah, I think sometimes I just find such remarkable courage in the migrants. I mean, they like us would not choose necessarily to go through that experience. And, it's interesting kind of walking with migrants who've crossed the deserts, say in the American Southwest, and you look at their situations and they don't actually kind of go into the desert to have a dark night or like John of the Cross, or they don't actually go in there to go through deep purification processes. But what is interesting is to see the parallels. When everything is stripped down, you get to the core of our humanity. I remember really once going down there, and I met this migrant who was just come across the border 3 or 4 days. He needed a ride, and he flagged me down. And at one point, I said, "What's it like out there?" And he didn't know who I was. And he says, "Oh my gosh, it was awful." He says, "I was walking with some friends. I lagged behind, and they left me behind." And he says, "Then I got lost in the desert. I got disoriented, and I couldn't find my way." And I said, "What did you think about?" And he said, "I realized that the only friend I have is God, and that God is the only friend who will not abandon me." And so I said, "Well, who is God for you?" And again, he didn't know I was a priest. He didn't know anything about me. And so he says, all I could think about was Job. He said he lost his health, he lost his friends, he lost his family. He says, but he never cursed God. And he says, that's who I want to be. And it's just so disarming. But I mean, the kind of authenticity and the clarity with which he spoke that, I think, rivals that of the great mystics. And so there is a purification process that goes on with that, and they had to confront their fears and confront death. But the remarkable courage they had to go through that, I think, was just inspiring.
So the name of the podcast is Only in America. So for every guest, I ask them the same question. Finish the sentence. Only in America, ...
Only in America could you have a place that could bring so many immigrant communities together and really try to become one. We're not the only ones with immigrants, but it is at the heart of our creed. And I think if you really see that we've been stitched together through the immigrant narrative, probably unlike any other country in the world today. We are both a country of laws, but we are a nation of immigrants. And so only in America could we see that a gift and a blessing, and not just something that we need to be afraid of and fear.
Father Dan is a Catholic priest and an award-winning author and filmmaker. He's also Associate Professor of Theology and Global Affairs at the University of Notre Dame. And that's all for our special edition. With thanks to our producers Regina Medina and Emily Chow, and executive producer Kathleen Farrell. I'm Ali Nirani. From all of us at the National Immigration Forum, happy Thanksgiving.